Hello, everyone. You're listening to Financial Marketing Secrets with Genesis Gems, and I'm Jenny Pierce. Well, I'm super excited today because I have a very special guest that I've been looking forward to interviewing for some time. So in this session, we'll be focusing on a very almost taboo-like topic called financial abuse. And financial advisors, we know, are people that deal with things that are much more than just numbers. It's really about relationships. It's very much about emotional intelligence and needing to know what their clients need almost before the client knows it. They have to have a sixth sense. And if there's ever anybody that I have met that has a sixth sense and has really learned and taught me how to put the extra W in wow, it's little Miss Wow, Michelle Hoskins. Welcome to Genesis Gems.
Thank you for having me. I always love these little introductions of me because, like, if you was to tell my mum or what you've just told me, she would have no idea who you were talking about. It's hilarious. Talking about brand and personal branding and stuff. My mum thinks I'm still 16 years old with ponytails. It's amazing. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh my goodness! We've had to bump and scrape around to get ourselves, because I'm just going to put it out there that you are not in Australia right now. I am. You're over in London, so the time zone's a little different, but we've made it work.
We have eventually.
So let me share a little bit about you, Michelle. You've had around 25 years of experience working alongside some of the world's most successful financial services organizations. You are a speaker. I've heard you speak quite a few times. You are an epic coach. You are a recognized author, but you are a leading expert in designing and implementing international framework-based best practice standards. That's a big mouthful, but there's one big thing. I think we should not forget that you are an honorary Aussie too.
I am. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. It's a pleasure to be one as well.
You are most definitely. You've been on our shores quite a few times, and when you walk in the room, you light it up, and we're always pleased to have you in Australia. So we hope to welcome you back again very soon.
I hope so. Thanks, Jenny.
So, look, we have got a very sensitive subject that I really want to do a deep dive into today. But before we do, I'd love it if you could share a snapshot of what has brought you to where you are today.
With pleasure. Look, just as a shout out to everybody, I think we are going to be talking about a subject that is highly emotional, both in a positive sense and also in a negative sense. So it's really important that you make sure that if you think for a second that this topic could trigger you in any way because of something that's happened to you or something that's happened to somebody that you know, please take care of yourself. Feel free to dip in and out as you feel it is needed, because you are the most important part of this podcast with Jenny and I. So Jenny, I think look, I came into this business when I was 20. I'm 45 this year, and I remember coming in, and I was effectively a secretary, a PA for 3 financial advisors, and it was very, very clear from the very outset that almost I was overwhelmed by the value that they added to their clients and the impact that they had on the lives of their clients. And I knew very early on that I'd really found my home. I'd worked in retail previously for a fashion designer in Nottingham, which is where I was originally from. And I just felt it was soulless and a bit thankless. And then I entered the world of financial services, and quite frankly, I've never left. People have said, do you want to, could you work for estate agents or accountants? And I was like, I have no interest in doing anything outside of financial services. And it's a real love of the job, and people often mistake me for being a financial advisor because I talk like a financial advisor with the same passion and enthusiasm. And I think there was a very instrumental moment in a significant moment in my journey very early on. And I actually remember driving to the airport, and, at the time I didn't have my daughter, and, I was in a new relationship. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing here? Like, why am I getting up early? Why am I working late? Why am I doing weekends? Why am I throwing double shifts? And I remember thinking to myself that I wanted, and these were my exact words as I was driving to this airport this day. And I said, I want to be instrumental in positively changing the face of financial services forever. And at the time, I was very young and I didn't really know how I would do that or what that would even look like. But I did sort of settle in myself knowing that the reality was that probably the results of my work over the coming years that was then, I would never really truly see in my lifetime. So I needed to find something, and I did find something that was extremely motivating for me to push and do what I needed to do to get the job done. And sacrifices have been made, of course, as we all do. So I think that's the sort of the story that not many people know. They see me doing my thing, but I think it started 20 odd years ago on a little drive to an airport, thinking that I was going to, what's got me here. It's really that moment, because I've just pushed on, and I've not, you talked just before we hit record about, branding. The word I would use about my personal brand is relentless. Like I just will not be stopped. Like it's almost like people have tried to knock me off track along the way, and I'm like, nope, thank you very much. I'm going to get back on, and I'm going to keep going. Relentless. So I think it started that moment, Jenny, if I'm honest, and I think it's just built from that point.
Yeah.
And here we are.
I think the thing that I've always admired when I've seen you speak, and obviously I've seen you speak more than once, as I mentioned, and I feel like when you resonate with any audience so well, because you articulate with such emotion and such passion that you can't help but be swept up in that when and I think that is it's such a skill, because we can often feel like we're being spoken to or at, whereas you almost put you virtually give a virtual hug from the stage or from wherever, whether it's through a screen,
Yeah.
So
and I think that's right. I think that comes into many elements of this conversation. I think it's passion and energy for your subject matter. You can't be an expert. You can't do what you do for this many years and not absolutely have fallen in love with your area. I mean, it costs too much from sacrifice perspective alone, never mind everything else. But yeah, so I think that's what's got me here ultimately. And I appreciate those comments, because I think this has never been a job. Never been a job. Have you ever watched going off subject very quickly, but in the new Maverick Tom Cruise movie, when he's being asked to train the kids and train the pilots, and he says, he's like, sir, he's like, this is not what I do, this is who I am.
Yes.
And I think that I suppose just sort of sums up who I am, in a Maverick analogy.
I'll remember that next time I watch Top Gun.
Yeah. Me and Tom Cruise.
I do think, though, like you, I absolutely adore the financial advice, profession, but I love financial intelligence. And I think that is something that, as someone, as marketing, and a brand consultant, I'm very conscious of what more can I do, and like you, to elevate that, and to make it easier and make it more accessible, or make it more robust in some ways. So I totally get what you're saying, but I never ever get over just how many strings to your bow that you have, because I think, goodness me, I don't know how you find time to do it. I know I struggle with the amount that I do, but you definitely have gone down a number of rabbit holes and come out with some amazing stuff. And in particular, this subject matter that we're talking about today, and rightly so. We are going to touch on sensitive subject, and we need everybody to take care. And, obviously, if there's anyone that needs help, you must always reach out. But I do want to do a deeper dive into the benefits in becoming a financial abuse specialist. I feel like that from a financial advisor's perspective, as I mentioned, the emotional intelligence and the intuition that these people have to have, it's, as I said, so much more than numbers. It is a real connection that they form. And in preparation for this meeting, for this podcast, I should say, I started obviously, you know what you know, like you do. I mean, you hear the stories, you hear, you get overwhelmed by the negative, experiences that you hear, and it just becomes such a big thing. But wow, when I started digging around, and I realized that there is some serious statistics around this stuff that really blew my mind. And I just wanted to elaborate. I was looking at a Bureau of Statistics report that was published, and it stated that 1 in 6 Australian women have experienced economic abuse by a partner, with an estimated 1.6 million having their money and job opportunities controlled or restricted, according to this particular survey. Now, they're kind of scary numbers. I'm just can we just unravel, like, what does this really mean? Like, financial abuse I certainly don't want to call it a taboo subject, but it feels like it is. And but we're hearing so much more about it. So can we kind of define what financial abuse is?
Yeah, with pleasure. So look, I think the first thing is, just bear in mind that any stats that you read are only those that report it. Okay, so with it being 1 in 6 women, it's actually about 1 in 7. I mean, depending on the survey, of course. But over here in the UK, they're talking about the numbers in the region of 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men.
Wow.
So it's not, it's quite something. So let me break it down a little bit for everybody. So, and this is my view of the subject, right? So I think there's lots of definitions and lots of terms of reference and things. But for me, if we think about us all as humans, we all have a set of needs. Now, I'm not talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not just talking about that, but I'm talking about, the needs that we have, not just to survive, but to thrive. And I think it's our given right to be able to have everything available to us as humans to be able to live life to the fullest, like without any compromise and without any question. And, nobody should have the power to restrict, exploit, or sabotage anything that we want. Ultimately, it's our given right as humans. So in order for us to thrive, we need economic resources. And what that means is we need food, we need water, we need safety, we need access to technology, we need access to money, we need access to friendships and family and love and support, clothing, personal products. We need a whole raft of things. And effectively, economic abuse or harm, which is also referred to as, is when somebody restricts, exploits, or sabotages those resources. So that could be, I'm in a relationship with a guy and he won't pay rent and he's living in my house, he's eating my food and he's enjoying my heating and electricity. That would be exploiting my economic resources. Okay. You've got there's such things as purple purse. There was you can Google it and you'll come up, where men in particular would sabotage a woman's access to sanitary products by a way of controlling them, so they couldn't leave the house. I mean, it's rife. I'll pull a stat up shortly, but one of the ways that men are controlled by women is by food. Women restrict the amount of food and the amount of sleep that men get as a form of control. So economic abuse or harm is when somebody effectively restricts, exploits, or sabotages somebody's access, another person's access to economic resources. Financial abuse and harm is when that approach is focused on money. Okay. So you sort of narrow it down. It's like peeling an onion, okay? And, we're talking about intimate relations in my examples there, but, that can be in parent-children relationships. It can be in children-parent relationships. It can be in business partner relationships. It can be in employee relationships, employee to employee. So we're talking about in relationships. And, I think just to pick up on a couple of words there that I deliberately used, there's you're right, Jenny. There is a feeling of this piece around abuse is a taboo word. And the problem with it is that people don't want to feel or be seen to be a victim of abuse. It presents as being weak. How did I let this happen? I'm embarrassed. There's a bit of ego there, depending on gender as a response. So I think harm is a word which is softer, but it doesn't and it shouldn't ever take away the severity of the subject matter. So, harm is a bit more palatable if you are a victim survivor. And also, that's another key word, which I think is key, just to get some clarification over. You've got the piece around victim survivor. Victim survivor needs to be used together, because actually, if you are a victim, you are surviving it. Okay, so the term victim survivor is extremely important to use. But that's really at the highest level, the simplest way of describing it. And in the UK now, the Domestic Abuse Act has included economic abuse in law, so that it's now illegal, it's a criminal offence, and it's even more of a criminal offence in post-separation. That's the link. That's the link why advisors are so absolutely perfectly placed to identify, support, spot when this may be the case in point. And we know that obviously we've just come out of lockdowns. It's been a horrendous time, and this is not a podcast about COVID, but one thing that was the biggest, why the rise in economic abuse, domestic violence, is because abusers always work from home. And where did everybody go? They went home. And it put children and it put adults in very, very, very dangerous hands during that time. So it's been a tricky time, and there's been a lot of increase in all forms of domestic violence because abusers always work from home.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the repercussions are still being felt. And, I mean, certainly, the long arm of COVID is, or the tentacles of COVID still seem to be playing out for everybody around the world, very varying ways. But not all of that is about the sickness. It is in fact about some of the, some of what you've been saying. That you raised something there that I thought was fairly interesting, and I was reading this statistic, and I'll just mention it here, that this particular survey mentioned that that women reported economic abuse at more than double the rate for men, of whom 7.8% or an estimated 745,000 experienced partner economic abuse. So is that like, I was actually kind of surprised at that, to be honest, but I sort of thought, I would not have thought that would have been the case. But is that a trend that you see, that women are now, finding their voice and therefore talking about, financial harm, as you were saying, or, and therefore men are less likely to? Or is that just, is this just an anomaly as far as a statistic goes?
Look, I think there's lots of things at play in that question. It's a very loaded, answered question. So I'll break it down a little bit. I think financial abuse, economic harm, financial harm is definitely more in the mainstream. The government's now backing it. Some of the banks here in the UK are doing providing something called a flea fund, where you can go into a bank and get about £500. You don't really have to say too much. There are safe spaces that people can go. And I think this has always been around. I think it's one of those things. It's a little bit like what COVID did for people working remotely. COVID also did for raising awareness of domestic abuse and domestic violence, and economic abuse is one form of domestic violence. So I think there's that. I think what you've also got is you've got generational traditions where, men are the alpha male, they're the dominant in the family, they're the leader, they're the breadwinner. They call all the shots, and that's generational. If we go back to our grandmas, and that was just how it was. And that gender norm, that sort of generational, it's changing, and the powers are shifting between men and women. And these are just my views and from my experiences, and even in my own personal situation. So I think let's break that question down. So if you think about the role of a female now in the household, I mean, effectively, we, generalizing, of course, but we work, we earn money, we keep the house, we look after the children, we pay the bills, we can organize the plumber and the decorator, and we can do a lot of that stuff. And the power is shifting. And what it's doing is men are, in my opinion, almost losing their way a little bit. So they are almost fighting to regain that. What's my role now? My woman, she can do everything pretty much. She can be self-sufficient. I mean, God, because one of the things I said, I mean, I came out of a relationship early 2020, and I remember thinking to myself, actually, I mean, and this is not a power to the women podcast, but I did think at the time when I was coming out of my relationship, I was thinking, you go back millions of years, men went out, killed, and kept everybody safe.
Yeah.
Right. And that was good, because when there was a saber-toothed tiger hurtling towards you, you needed somebody to be big and strong and smash a rock over somebody's head. Great. Now, what is the fuel that's fueling our generations today? And it's emotion, and it's what women have in abundance. So the women's role is changing. And what you find is that when you have males, who are in relationships where their masculinity is in question, they look to control via many forms, but money is becoming the new one.
Yeah.
And it's because that's what women can also bring to the table. So there's that piece at play. And I profile a number of ladies, very highly affluent, wealthy, successful, and money was the tool that the male used to not empower, but overpower them. And, lots of reasons were used why that was the case. But ultimately it was money, because it was the one thing that it was almost the last thing that the man could do. So I think there's that. I think flipping it over, I think men will not talk about it as much. They don't want to talk about it as much because they're absolutely embarrassed that this is even a thing. I had a friend of mine, her brother, he was a victim of domestic abuse, and he was being beaten black and blue. And I knew, because he'd confided in her as his sister, but the family never knew, his friends never knew, his work colleagues never knew.
Wow.
And he would never talk about it. Report it? Are you joking? He is not even in one of those stats. Now we're talking specifically about domestic abuse there, but there was absolutely signs of financial abuse in that. He would never tell anybody, not really.
No.
And that's because of embarrassment, probably. And that's why, even Jenny, as an example, for me to try and get men to talk on my programs and, my courses, it's like a non-starter. They just will not. I have to get people to talk about them, like the lawyer, the domestic abuse counsellor, that will tell their tale.
Their story, yeah.
But they won't. And it's probably, this whole piece around stiff upper lip, especially in the UK, we're very British at times. But, I think that's across the globe. You're just not going to get them to talk about it. They have to be the strong one. And, imagine going down the pub with your mates and saying, just to let you know, I have to give all my money at the end of the week and I don't get to see any, and I can't even afford a pint of beer. His mates would be like, are you even joking? Whereas a woman telling a woman would be like, oh my God, let's get you help. Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And it is being
they've got to be
off.
willing to admit that there's even a problem in the first place anyway. And 90% of the time that's not the case.
Absolutely. And they'll just brush it under the carpet. So it is a very complex, very, very, very complex area. And again, bringing it back to advisors, this has, financial abuse and economic harm has no it doesn't select on class or status or financial wealth. It doesn't. It's just humans together. So,
Mm.
and if you look at those stats, Jenny, if it is 1 in 6, to 1 in 7 male, females, think about, who's listening to this podcast, and think about the people that they work with in their teams.
Mm. Mm.
How many clients in their client bank have they got? And,
Mm.
and our advisors have said to me, my clients don't do that. I'm like, you reckon? The challenge I've had, honestly, Jenny, is, and this is probably where, you talk about me going down rabbit holes and coming out with some amazing stuff. I am relentless in all of these matters. But one of the biggest challenges I've got is that, when I speak to a group of mainly male financial advisors, I've got perpetrators in that audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tough. And they might not even realize it. They may not even realize that they are a perpetrator. And that is just one thing I want to just say on that, because I think it is important to do it at this point, is what happened was, so there's a very fine line between care and control. So let's imagine you and Michael, right? Let's imagine, you're in COVID, Michael is the breadwinner, or you're the breadwinner, and you've got COVID, you've got some ill health in the family, you're very cautious about going out, what you spend because of redundancies and furloughs and all this kind of thing. And, and lockdowns, and where one person may have a tendency to kind of overdo it, as in get super over cautious, over controlling. Where are you going? What are you doing? What are you spending? And actually that habit forms very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So what you've got is, you've not just got the kind of narcissistic control channels of, wanting to really do it deliberetely, but it's almost accidental control, not even realizing that it's been a thing, but you've kind of, it's run away with you. So it's so delicate, this area, literally. So I think that's why it needs to just be spoken about, and take the fangs out of it a bit,
I think you're quite right. I think it's about just having those conversations as a profession, financial advice, a profession. I think they need to, it needs to be spoken about. We talk about a lot, in financial advice, regulation, compliance, governance, all these different things, and I find this particular subject is the one that you hear the quiet discussions happening. Whereas the other conversations are, everyone around the table, everyone on the stage, it's a very loud conversation. So it's quite, and literally, I certainly won't speak out of school, but, obviously I work with many financial advisors, and I would say at least half of them have had at some point told me about a scenario or a situation where they've had to correct it. Not always young women or middle-aged women. Some of the financial abuse that I've had discussed with me has been to do with aged care clients, where the parent is no longer in control of their finances, and they're not necessarily being taken care of
properly.
So I do think, which kind of leads me to an area that I want to kind of touch on, and we'll come back to how how do you become a financial abuse specialist. But do you feel like, I mean, there's in Australia, particularly at the moment, we're seeing a lot of advisors specialize, that the days of being a generalist advisor is kind of not around so much anymore. You'll get a risk advisor, or you'll get, you might get someone that chooses to specialize in delivering advice to women, or, you might get your high net worth style clients, but, or aged care specialists. But do you feel like there's a style of advice where this type of thing seems to pop up more?
I mean, I think I'm going to answer that question in a broad sense. I think niching is key, and specialisms are key. I mean, I do a lot, but in one market, right? You do a lot, but in one market, and it's the place you love, right? So I think, you're the branding expert. I am by no means a branding expert, but I think, you tap into a natural passion, don't you? And I think, I've just finished drafting a new keynote presentation, which is called Consumer Vulnerability, the Next Global Pandemic. And I actually think that we talk about financial abuse specialists, but really, what is that? That's a specialist in vulnerable circumstances. And you see a lot, dealing with particular types of clients, in terms of profession, actuaries, dentists, doctors, that kind, many that are specializing in giving advice to women, divorce coach type expertise. I think if I was doing this again, if I was an advisor and I was, on the journey of my career, I would be a specialist in consumers and clients in vulnerable circumstances who find themselves in vulnerable circumstances. And the reason being is because there's many in our lifetime. If you're going through a divorce, if you've lost a partner, if you've come out of a relationship, if you've inherited lots of money, if you've sold your business, any situation where you need handling and caring for carefully, I think that's the specialism that I would go for if I was a financial planner and an advisor today. And I think it is the next global pandemic, because I think, you only need to look at the cost of living crisis, I know people who are leaving the UK because it's so expensive to live here. I mean, these are crazy times, right? So I think there is I think that, we're talking about financial abuse specifically, but, what that certification mark is, what that specialism is a beacon for people who need to be cared for sensitively with delicate hands, can go and seek out.
I guess actually, look, actually need to digest that. That's so true. It's such a beacon. And I do
trainers.
I do think that, we're going through professional standards changes over here, which I know you're aware that there's lots been going on for quite a long time now around qualifications, expertise, knowledge, and, everyone having a piece of paper around meeting a criteria, and therefore you can go away now and be an advisor. But one of the big things that, I've spoken to many financial advisors about is the sheer lack of EQ that's taught in all of that. And I do feel like that's somewhere what you're just saying there is quite true, that not everybody, when they walk in the door and say, hey, look, I don't know what to do with this, is necessarily, being abused. Or is in economic harm, but they are in an emotional situation. And I feel like that's where some of this stuff all comes in. So let's just talk about the certification and what drove you to create it.
Yeah, so I may be an honorary Aussie, but one of my very closest friends is an Aussie. So Amanda Cassar, who you know very well, she actually came over. Do you know what? I can't actually remember why she came over, but she stayed with me for a few days, and we were sitting in the kitchen and we were talking about, just kind of stuff. But prior to that moment, so let's I'm going to make up the year because I actually can't remember. Let's say it was 2019. Going back some time, I was with Amanda at a $1 million round table meeting. I think it was in Miami or somewhere fancy. And she said to me, can I interview you for my book? And I said, of course you can interview me for your book. What book and what are you writing about? Like I just said yes before I even knew it could have been anything, couldn't it? And she said she was going to write a book called Financial Secrets Revealed. And she interviewed me, and I told her my story about money and my relationship with money, etc., etc. And anyway, when the book came through, there was a story in there that she'd interviewed a lady called Tanya Target, and Tanya had fallen foul of a gentleman who effectively had made her life an absolute misery. And it was so bad, her situation, that she ended up siphoning off food cards when she went shopping, so that when she decided to leave and she felt it was safe to leave, that she could feed her and her daughter. Now, at the time, I think her daughter was 8 when I read this, and my daughter was 8. And what shocked me the most, being an absolute novice to this whole area, was that she was super successful. She was a speaker. She had a great business. She was a global traveler, you know, amazing story. Yet she'd found herself fallen foul of effectively what was a narcissist and an economic financial abuser and domestic abuser. So I was like, oh my Jesus, like what's going on here? Like, and I got all on my high horse and I read this book and I phoned Amanda and I was like, is this even true? Is this even a real person? Did you really interview this person? And did she really get blah, 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 blah? And she's like, yeah, it's really, really true. And I'm like, Amanda, we need to do something about this. So what I did was I actually put a short poll out on social media. And it was very simple, nothing fancy. It was basically like 3 questions, you know, and it was like, when I say financial abuse, do you A, know all about it, B, have some kind of idea, or C, have no idea what I'm talking about? And bearing in mind, my followers are all financial services pretty much. And it was almost a unanimous, I kind of know a bit about it, but I don't really know what you're talking about. And then pretty much me and Amanda set to, we brought people in, we brought committees in, we brought, you know, input, and we created the financial abuse specialist certification, which is effectively about sort of 12 to, depending on how slow you do it or how quickly you do it, between 8 and 12 hours worth of learning, case studies, Q&A, videos, interviews, audios, and then you're quizzed on it along the way. And then you have to submit the final submission, which is your policies, your processes, your controls on what you would do if this was to happen, or you to spot somebody that was a victim survivor. And then you have to upload a short video talking about it. And this is what happens, is all that gets submitted to us centrally, and we assess and validate your responses and your answers to those questions. And then if you've satisfied the criteria of being able to demonstrate extensive knowledge in this area, then we will award you the certification to the financial abuse specialist, and then you get your logo and your designations. And then it's then assessed the year after, and then 2 years thereafter. And what's amazing about the ongoing, because obviously I was one of the first to do it myself, was, you know, as you move through the years, you are able to pick subjects that you've picked up in the press, or you know, so I'm coming up for my my second renewal, and I'm going to pick the subject of Gabby. Remember, it was all over the press about Gabby. She was a YouTuber. She'd gone traveling with her boyfriend, and you know, a few days after, she was pulled over by the police. So I'm going to basically depict that whole situation, and I'm going to do my case study on that. And it's just expanding the knowledge that we have as abuse specialists to make sure that we are staying on top of our knowledge, but making it really real, not some just, you know, Q&A exam questions. But so it's a really emotional process to go through to get the certification. You know, and it's something that Amanda and I did. You know, we didn't get paid for it. You know, it's going to be years probably before we get paid back what we put into creating the course. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, we needed to educate a market that this was a thing. And, you know, it was the way that we knew how to do that. And there's amazing charities, you know, all over the world, but we just needed something so that the consumer, the victim survivor, could seek out advisors, professionals that had that designation, to know that should they approach them, they'd be in great hands.
I think, you know, well, I mean, I applaud you both for the energy and the effort that you've gone to create the certification, and you know, certainly I'll include all of the information in regards to, and the links to get access to it, so you can, if you're interested, you can definitely make an inquiry. But you know, one of the things that you know, you were saying there is that, you know, there's charities and things like that, but sometimes they're dealing with things once the worst has happened.
Absolutely.
And whereas I think financial advisors are almost at a point where it's either in its infancy or it's in its duration, you know, and they're
Yes,
able
correct,
to,
Jenny.
you know, and I feel like this is where this certification can really help advisors,
Yeah.
you know, step in and perhaps, you know, create a level playing field for people that are in harm's way, whether it be economic or whatever else. But I definitely think that's the thing that, you know, the charities are sort of mopping up the pieces, whereas I feel like advisors are almost the gatekeepers. They can help You know, I certainly don't want to imply they can prevent it, because that's in the power of the perpetrator.
Yeah.
But, you know, I do think they are certainly people that can close the gate to allowing it to continue. And that's
1,000%.
You know,
1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, that and knowing the advisors, then the caliber of people that are advisors that I know, and obviously you know them as well, and Amanda would be one of them. You know, these people are the people that put themselves in the way of things to make sure that the people that this is happening to are taken care of. And that's really something for me. You know, it's stepping up more than just worrying about, you know, whether or not you've submitted the right form. You know?
Yeah. Oh my God.
So,
look, you know what, Jenny, you couldn't have hit the nail on the head any better if you tried, actually. I mean, I think if you're an advisor, I think there's a couple of little takeaways I want advisors to take away from this podcast that they can actually do, you know, almost immediately. And that the first one is just watch more in those meetings, listen more to the words and the tone of the words that are being said by either party. Look for clients when they make excuses for their partners. Oh, he's doing this because of that. She won't like that because of this. Oh, she's having a bad time because of... Listen for the excuses, because that's one of the signs that there's something wrong. Secondly, you know, trust your gut instinct. I mean, oh my God, if, you know, half of the time we all as humans, you know, override our gut instinct, but oh my God, it never lets me down ever, 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 ever. The more I listen to my own gut instinct, the better, quite frankly. But I think, you know, and actually make it your business. So, you know, it's like, well, it's not my business to ask about their personal life. Absolutely, it absolutely is. Like, if you've got a client sitting in front of you, you can't just focus on their money. You are there to look at the whole person, to, you know, dig deeper. It will not be, well, why is my advisor asking me about that? You're perfectly placed to do it. No other profession can do that. No other profession. That's right. True. A doctor wouldn't, an accountant wouldn't, a banker wouldn't, a lawyer wouldn't. Financial advisors are absolutely primed, which is why, you know, we carry on. And you're right, the charities do have to mop up, unfortunately. I mean, there's lots of stories I could tell you for benefit of time. We don't have that much time, but you know, it's brutal out there, and often it's too late by the time they get to the charities. So spotting, supporting and signposting is what the role of the advisor is, not, you know, coming to the rescue and fixing all the problems or the issues or challenges, but just to be there as a support and to signpost.
That's so well said. So I certainly don't want to make light of a very serious subject, but as you know, we've been talking about personal brand, and you have spent a lot of time evolving your very wonderful personal brand, and I guess, you know, everybody's probably wondering what on earth has that got to do with this, but if you're a financial advisor and you have this amazing skill set, you know, and you mentioned the word beacon, we live in a completely digital world these days, you know, very, you know, the in-person thing isn't such a thing so much anymore. And I do feel like, you know, that it would be kind of cool to talk about that personal brand piece, like, you know, how you've evolved your personal brand, and so you're known for the things that you're known for. I mean, these people need to be able to be seen, and how do they elevate, you know? So what are your tips in that space?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm always very lucky in as much that I have a lot of energy. You know, I make energy, I create my own energy, and I'm very energetic as a person. So I think, look, if you're going to do anything in business, you've got to know that you've got the firepower behind you to be able to see it through. You know, we had RDR here in the UK, for example, and, you know, there was lots of coaches, consultants popping up wanting to help advisors, and they've gone. Now RDR's gone, they've gone, you know, whereas I stood the test of time and ploughed through as one of the soldiers, right? So I think, you know, you've got to make sure that, you know, the subject that, or the area, the specialism, you know, the job that you're doing, you know, is going to keep you motivated for the rest of your life doing it. So I think that's the first thing I would say. I think the second thing is about authenticity. There's one of my favorite quotes is, authenticity alone does not guarantee success, but in a lack of authenticity will guarantee failure. And I think there are many people who are trying to be something that they're not. They're trying to be something that they believe is a success in what other people are doing. You can't be anybody other than yourself. So, I mean, I've always been very much myself. Like, people always used to comment to me, they'll say, oh my God, like, you're the same person on stage talking to 5,000 people as you are in the bar having a gin and tonic after the session. Like, I'm the same person. There isn't another persona. The whole Little Miss Wow brand is who I am. I was saying to you earlier, like, my niece calls me Auntie Wow because I'm the best auntie in the world. Like, I'm one of these dodgy aunties. I'm an amazing auntie. But, like, I'm Auntie Wow. So you live and you breathe who you are authentically without any fear of upsetting anybody else. And, I've had it, this is not the sob story, but, I've had people try and knock me off my perch many, many, many times over the years. I've been ripped to pieces on social media for doing standards and this, that, and the other. You know what? They can all go and get stuff, quite frankly, because I am who I am and I'm pushing forward. So I think, being you, authentically you, for those of you that have seen me on stage, I'm often in a glittery, sparkly top or a pair of Dr. Martin patent boots. I mean, there's no in between. But, you go for bold, right? So I think be you, be confident in your own skin, go for what you are, and, latch on to a subject matter that literally sets your heart on fire, like smashes it out of the park every day for you. And, I've often, got involved in things like this as a subject in itself because of a personal passion and of a drive to make the world a better place, right? And part of my problem is, I think if I did a commercial, risk assessment or a commercial return on investment assessment before I start these things, half of the stuff I do, I wouldn't have even started because I make no money at them. But equally, they are the right thing to do. And, I believe that do things that are right, not what's easy. So, it's, you've got to believe in what you're doing, whatever the subject. And, if you've got an interest or a passion in things like financial abuse, domestic violence, those in vulnerable circumstances, or whatever it might be, go for it and don't let anybody knock you off your spot, because, it takes a lot of courage to be an expert and a specialist in a certain area. But I think it pays off. And, I love the brand that I am. And sometimes I literally turn up in boardrooms, and I'll say, is it like prior to the day, I'll be like, is there these big companies? And I'll say, is there an agenda for the day we're together? And they're like, no, we just want to ask you questions. And I literally sit there. I'm not even joking, Jenny. I literally sit there. I mean, I did one only about 3 weeks ago. I sat there in this huge boardroom with like 12 people, all these big highbrow executives, and they literally just asked me questions about stuff. And I gave my opinions and my answers. And at the end of the session, I was like, well, I hope that was value. They're like, oh my God, absolutely loved it. Thank you so much. And I'm literally sitting there. I'm like sitting there, but it's because your point right at the beginning, it's emotion, and I just share my feelings. So if you can get paid for what you feel, I think you're onto a winner, right? But that's taken 25 years to get me to that situation, and it's cost me dearly. Like, I've not done the school run, and I've not been to clubs halfway as much as I should. But, it's interesting. I'll tell you this story very quickly, right? I came over to the AFA when I came over to the AFA conference in Adelaide, and it actually fell on my daughter's birthday. And when I got the dates, I was like, oh, shitbag. Oh, like when I knew that it was like fell on the 2nd of September and the traveling time. And we came home from school, and I said to her, look, darling, I said, we're going to make this decision together. I said, because obviously it's your birthday and this, that, and the other. And I said to her, look, I've been invited to go and talk about something that's really important. And at the time, there was a lot of suicides within financial services because of the Royal Commission and all the rest of it. And I explained a little bit about that to her. And I said, look, I've been asked to go and speak to these advisors to tell them that there's hope and blah, blah, blah. And I said, but it's your birthday. And she said, Mummy, you're Little Miss Wow. She said, you go.
Yeah.
That's what she said to me. right?
Got an old head on young shoulders.
But what was very interesting was, and I'm saying this because, often women who, and there's lots of stories, but there's, often as women, often we need a wife at home, right? And, it's a joke and we joke about it as women, but often we do. And when I got back, I didn't know she'd done this actually, but when I got back, while I was away, she knew I was talking about well-being and everything. And when I got back, I got a message from her headmaster from her school, and she put together a slide clip art on PowerPoint on my old laptop, and she put herself forward as the well-being ambassador at school.
Oh,
and I didn't know. Literally, she did it while I was away, and she became right. And she became the well-being ambassador at school. And I mean, there's no words that I could have ever used to have explained how happy I was, really. But I thought to myself, you know what? Sometimes the sacrifices are worth it, and you never know who's watching, right? So, I think
so true.
Yeah, you just got to go for it. You've got to do what you believe in, and these are the things that I believe in, and these are the things that I champion every day. So,
I think that one of the things that is that is quite relevant to me, and like we've had multiple conversations, and I can truly testify to the fact that you are exactly the same on stage as when you're off the stage. Maybe just sometimes the energy dips when they with the travel and the time zone change, but I you power through like no one I know, so I do agree with all of that. But one of the things that I feel that you've done particularly well, and I think that this is about authenticity, is build connection. And I think that, if you're a financial advisor and this is your space and you're looking to create a better place for clients that potentially are at risk, then I think it is about making sure that you're authentic, but you're building strong connections so that that beacon of being known for, this type of work, or, even just the emotional EQ around this type of work. I think that's really important, because we obviously all have really different types of conversations, but, you've got to be willing to have those conversations and connections. And I think that's one thing you've done particularly well.
Yeah. Well, I love people. That's why I'm an honorary Aussie.
Yeah, that's why you're an honorary Aussie.
Honorary Aussie.
Oh gosh, that's hard to get out when it's getting late at night. Look,
so,
I do think we've got there's so much more we could talk about on this subject, and I do, and but I am very conscious that I don't want to go down a path that may certainly trigger anybody. But I do feel like that if we can make more advisors aware that this type of certification exists, and it's there purely to help them do what they do even better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message here.
I would just a couple of things just to close on, Jenny, if I can. There is there's a few things to talk about qualifications and specialisms. One of the things that I tell all financial advisors to do, without any question, is to become a mental health first aider. And going through the mental health first aider course and the learnings and the teachings that they share with you is absolutely unbelievable. Just knowing how to answer questions, ask questions. One of the key takeaways that I took when I did it was, rather than saying "How are you" to somebody, say "How are you today?" Little subtle changes. And actually, it's quite nice to learn something that's not about, financial services particularly. And what I would also like to say, and it's a huge shout out to an amazing lady that you have on your home soil, a lady called Rebecca Glenn, and she champions the Centre for Women's Economic Safety. It's the charity in Australia. And, everybody needs to go and check out the work that they're doing there and support them in any way they can, whether it be through, fundraising or giving support to their helpline, to their victim survivors. I had the privilege of meeting Rebecca face to face when I came over to Sydney recently. And the passion she's got for this subject, and it's a charity, and they need all the help they can get. So that's the Centre of Women's Economic Safety, an incredible charity that you've got in your home shores. So, So yeah, look, we could talk forever. It's a subject that is extremely sensitive and delicate, but it's one that needs to be spoken about more and more and more and more, so the perpetrators can't hide behind closed doors.
Well, as my darling little granddaughter would say, you are incredibly wow. And I'm so thrilled that we've finally been able to chat, even though it's a very, very heavy topic. I'm just so glad that we've been able to get the message out, and I've been able to spend some quality time with you. So thank you so much.
It's been lovely.
Michelle.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Financial Marketing Secrets. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to follow me, Jenny Pierce, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, wherever you enjoy joining the conversation. Can't wait to connect with you. I'm looking forward to sharing some more Genesis gems with you in the next session of Financial Marketing Secrets. See you then.